about 14 people, waiting on a couple more. But I'll send out the agenda now, just in case you guys weren't able to see it before. Okay, we have to vote on some things, so we need at least 21 people. So I think we're missing just a couple people. So if we want to just go around, see how we're doing. If you want to quickly introduce yourself, just your name, pronouns, and organization. I know we all know each other, but just to give us some time. I can start, and if the co-chairs of the subcommittees are here, they can go next. So everyone, you all know me. I'm Hennessy, pronouns she, her, and of course I'm with the commission, helping you guys in any way I can. So if you want to go Allison, I see Bob. If we want to go listen, Bob, Amanda, Jean-Luc, go from there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Frazee, she, her. I'm Executive Director of the Boston Preservation Alliance and co-chair of the Legislation and Tools Subcommittee.
I'm Bob Allison. I teach history at Suffolk University.
Hi, Amanda Zettel. I am the president of Charlestown Preservation Society.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jean-Luc Perit, and I'm president of the North American Indian Center of Boston.
Amazing. I see Ferris, Colin, Dory, Kid, Kenzie next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ferris Gray. I'm the Sagamore of the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapook.
Hi there, I'm Dory Klein. I am the Community History Supervisor at the Boston Public Library.
I am Colin Knight, he, him, and I'm the founder and CEO of Live Like a Local Tourist Boston.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kid Wong Street Chanalai. I'm the Director of Research at the Massachusetts Historical Society.
Hey everyone, I'm Noelle Trent. I'm the CEO of the Museum of African American History, Boston and Nantucket. Pronouns she, her.
We're missing Kim, Kristen, Kenzie.
Hi everyone. I'm jumping in. Kim, go ahead. You can go first.
Sorry about that. Hi everyone, my name is Kim. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an archivist with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
All right. I'm Jenna Lacqua. I'm the Executive Director of the History Project. We are Boston's queer community archives. I use she, her pronouns.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Lafferty from the City of Boston Archives.
And I'm Kenzie Bach. I run the Boston Housing Authority, but I'm here in my capacity as an intellectual historian.
We still don't have, okay. There's Carolyn. Amazing. Sam, okay, people are rolling in now. Hi, Carolyn and Sam. We're just quickly reintroducing ourselves, name, pronouns, and organization. Take one time. Okay. Guess while we wait, did you guys have a chance to review the meeting minutes? Do we have any edits, any comments, anything that you noted that you might want to bring up in this meeting? No? Okay. Good. All right, so it's hard to get started because we need to vote for the co-chairs. And can't do that without a quorum. So let's see. We're missing a couple people. No worries. No worries. You're not even the tardiest one, I'm sure. Let me just double check how many we have. It. All right, so there are some things on the agenda that I guess I can say ahead of time, based on prior conversations that I was having with the subcommittees. So like the social media and the website updates. I have put up social media, so it's there. It is lying low, because as I've told, I think some of the subcommittees, every time that I try to create an Instagram, and put up the official City of Boston Commemoration Commission info and the picture, I would get banned. So I would try to appeal it and nothing, they refused. So I have one in the reserves that is lying low, as much as possible so that they do not ban us. And in terms of a website, we had the Events, Exhibits, and Trails Subcommittee met 2 weeks ago now, and decided, I guess we want to probably open that to discussion, but decided that without a logo and without a vision, and without some branding, we should hold off on having a website be executed because we want to roll everything out at once. And I think that's part of it's number 3 on our agenda. It's establishing foundations. One of the things I think that will be important for us to do is to have a brand. Did you guys get to read the master plan for Boston 200 or skim through it? Okay, cool. We'll talk about it. I just read all 382 pages of it. So they do have some interesting concepts around how they did their branding, and also everything else that they wanted to roll out. But I wanted to, when we get there, we'll talk a little bit more about what they did. Okay, great. And also constituent comments. I have reviewed that at this point, I think with all subcommittees except for legislation and preservation tools. And I guess I can put that up now so we can review it once more since these things don't require votes. Yeah, I will pull it up really quickly and we can talk about it. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Can you see my screen? Anybody?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
we.
amazing. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I can't see all of you. Okay, so I know some of you guys have seen this, but I wanted to just quickly do a review with a larger group. So these are comments that I've gotten through email or through that Google form that I have up on the website, or the same Google form, but when I was out at an event, and shared it through a QR code and things like that. So this one was an email in which, gosh, I should not put his full stuff on the on the screen, but so this is from Dave Broker, and he was interested in commemorating a site on Washington and Fuller Street for the Liberty Tree Tavern. And it's interesting because when I was reading the Boston 200 master plan, they actually mentioned the Liberty Tree Tavern and commemorating it. So I'm not sure what happened there. But Dave and his team wants to create a plaque or a sign near the site. And so people recommended the Landmarks Commission. The Landmarks Commission sent it to me. And I think it was brought up in the Events, Exhibits, and Trail Subcommittee, the idea of 250 markers or 250 plaques or something like that for the 250th, which is a pretty cool idea. I think it was Dave O'Donnell who brought that up. So that was one email that we got, but a lot of them are from the survey. And so people from the North End, some commissioners from JP, they talked about things that they would like, that are not protected, that they would like to see protected. So this person said, Jessica said, in the North End, all of these early 18th century and early 19th century structures are at risk. She singled out specifically St. Leonard's Church, and she would like to see specifics around 19th century immigration, which is something that was also highlighted in Boston, in the Boston 200 plan. So Laura, also in the North End, said she would like to see more celebrations for Italians in October. Sue Loganian said she would like to see 3 Decker streetscapes preserved and more events in neighborhoods outside of downtown, which is great. Gretchen Grozer said all 18th century buildings should be landmarked, period. And she said Maud Cooney Hare, Black women in general, immigrants, Latinx immigrants from the 60s, LGBTQIA plus communities, walking tours of every city neighborhood. Another thing that that Boston 200 wanted to do and was executing with neighborhood committees, a Mattapan Historical Society, and more, okay, amazing. More stuff for Women's History Month. She also said the Parkman Memorial by Jamaica Pond needs more accessible walkways, which is accessibility, writing it down. Oh, and signage and memorial, and that interprets the memorial, the man, and speaks to the indigenous peoples that inhabited the area. Susie Buchanan, Shirley Eustace House. She's talking about Shirley Eustace House itself and how it offers a vantage point to look at enslaved Africans of the 18th centuries and the immigrant communities of Boston. She thinks that Barry Gaither, founder of the National Center of Afro-American Artists, also Ina Fox, commemoration of the Haitian Revolution for 1793, aftermath for African Americans, and it's not particularly relevant to 250. I remember talking about this 2 weeks ago. I said it is relevant for 250 because Samuel Perkins and the Perkins brothers for Perkins School of the Blind went to Haiti, and one of the enslaved Africans that they brought passed away here and has a commemoration in Mattapan. But they did have a vested interest in molasses and the slave trade in Haiti. So Kimberly Rose at Elm Hill. Talks about the house middle class African American families. She wants to see BPA, Brian Austin Historical Society, History Project. A lot of you guys are here. Celebrated. She also wants to see the Aerosmith apartment highlighted, commemorated for their 50th anniversary. Elaine Noble, first openly lesbian candidate. And Angelina Weld Grimke, she specifies not her aunt, but the playwright. And they also, a lot of these people have a lot of experience in the things that they're writing about. Tom Sullivan, he wants to see the fortification of Dorchester Heights. He actually wants to get the historical societies together, Dorchester, Hyde Park, I think, and a couple other ones to talk about Dorchester Heights. I think Rosendale as well. Dr. Francis Bremer, he's from Pennsylvania. We talked a lot. He sent me an article about John Winthrop and the importance of commemoration. So he says commemorative plaques that were put up in 1930 for the tercentennial. He said these should be examined for updating, but others noting the native presence of the region should be added, and noting the first arrival of enslaved peoples. He says, separate from the municipal plaques that are stone carvings in front of 400 Beacon Street, which depict key events in early settlement. Beyond this, plaques recognizing contributions of later arrivals should be considered. He's saying everyone who has contributed to Boston over 400 years should be recognized, but this should also include English colonists. So, and he says a lot, so well. She says we could use, Kara from Mission Hill says we could use help preserving and protecting historical basilica in the surrounding area. At the low point, the church sold off several buildings to Western Associates for a small amount of money. The community has attempted to buy back those buildings, but hasn't been able to. Their plans for parcels will not enhance our neighborhood. Boston talks about building safe, productive communities, but is not doing it. A consortium of neighborhood groups have come together to challenge Article 80 reform initiative. The Historical Preservation Department could be a great supporter of citizens who wish to build a better city that's people-focused, people-centric, not college-centric, biolab, flavor of the month focused. Developers have been allowed direct development too long. The citizens know what's needed. My family has been in construction in Boston for 100 years and have heard it all from both sides. It's time to trust the citizens. I think when we talk about the updates from each subcommittee, I think the legislation and preservation tools will have some updates that they'd like to share around that. Amy shared some buildings in the West End, 42 Lamassey Way and 149 Salem Street in the North End that should be considered historic buildings. There should also be a marker in the place where Phyllis Wheatley lived. And she would like Indigenous Peoples Day to be prioritized. This call for input should be publicized more broadly, that's true. And then she shouted out NICOB and the UMass Boston department. Okay, that's what I have. 21 of you. I think we have enough. I'm not sure. But anyway, based on those comments that I read, what popped out at you guys so that I can start writing down some notes. Sorry if it's loud. So yes, Kenzie.
I was just gonna say, I don't think Dave's on the call, but I think the idea of 250 markers is a really nice like concept. And when and in particular, because I was thinking as you were reading some of the examples about just like how much variety there is in sort of the types of things that we're trying to commemorate, and wanting to have that feeling of like of having a lot of different lenses, for both the 250th and the 400th. And of course, like the whole like America's birthday, I think there's both like a bunch of places like the Liberty Tree. Of course we should have a marker at the Liberty Tree. And of course we should have a marker where like Phyllis Wheatley lived. Like there's just like, some of these are examples where you're like, wow, right. We don't have the blue plaque thing they have in London, right? Where they put it on sort of every significant site. But I think that, I think one of the greatest challenges for this commission is going to be how to wrangle the wide variety of things into like something actionable. And I was just thinking about how much I think it's meant, even just in the last year, the 69 names that they made the decision to put on the Embrace like Freedom Plaza, I think have like served as a nice reference point and a nice way to make a like Boston connection into that civil rights history. And yeah, so I was just thinking that, whether it turns out to be 250 or something else, I think the concept of having some kind of category that we are then trying to fill that's capacious enough to let a lot of different things in, but still defined so that we could actually get to a list of 250 plaques to put up, or like, you know, we want to do 20 neighborhood trails, or like, I don't know. I just think we're going to need to start having categories of things that we can like bless different decentralized endeavors, but have them be under like parallel frameworks. Like I know that I think that in the bicentennial, there was an effort to do branch library exhibits about like each neighborhood, or and it was different neighborhood committees did different things, but the idea that each one was doing something was like a consistent thing. So I just wanted to appreciate that suggestion.
Yeah. Ferris, please give me just 1 second and then you can go. Yeah, when I was reading the Boston 200 master plan, they established, I think they made sure that each neighborhood established something, and I think they had someone that was helping them facilitate these projects. They said they made sure, or would like to make sure, I'm not sure if they achieved it, that each neighborhood coalition or committee had like $5,000 for some improvement project, or some project that would lead to commemoration. So I would agree. I think that's one of a similar and best practice. I'm sorry, Ferris, go ahead.
Thank you. I liked all the comments. I think that kind of input is a really valuable resource for us. And the fact that people, you know, took the time to really think about it's awesome. I would like to see added the Boston's Harbor Islands. It would be really awesome. I know my tribe is really in support of the historic preservation placed on Boston's Harbor Islands, to, you know, because all of them are historically important to Boston. I'd like to see that included with this awesome and tremendous, you know, celebration. You know, there's not many communities that can boast 400 years of celebration. So we're like alone with this. But the Harbor Island is really important to us today. They were really important to the indigenous people before colonization, and they were really important to the colonists during colonization. So I think that's really it's really an open and shut case to get that preservation on the Boston Harbor Islands, and also plaques and all that as well. I would really like to see, well, we would really like to see those islands included. Thank you.
Bob?
He may not have heard you.
Okay, sorry. Bob?
Oh, maybe Bob, you're muted.
Yeah, I agree with I like the idea of the 250 plaques, because that is a manageable thing. And it also, as you were saying, allows for lots of, you know, different voices, different things. I also agree with Ferris about the Harbor Islands being really an essential thing. I like the fact that this list has gotten us to think about the city as a whole and not just the downtown. So there is, I think, something important to keep in mind as we're looking ahead. And I know for the bicentennial, each neighborhood also did a neighborhood history. I don't think we need to do that necessarily, but it is something that was done. I also like the idea of each neighborhood getting money, or having someone with money to actually do these things. So I like the idea of the 250 plaques. It's a manageable thing. And yeah, let's remember the Harbor Islands.
Great. So while
Hennessy's, can I say it, just a quick thing?
Mhm.
Just, I also think like what's really nice is that we have an opportunity for a longer arc than the bicentennial committee did, because the bicentennial committee, it was like 76, right? Was like the year, but they didn't have the 400th following right behind, right? So I think one of the nice things for us is like we can do things like 250 plaques, and then, you know, when in 2027 people are like, gee, it's too bad we didn't do these other things, we can be like, we're topping it up to 400 plaques by 2030, or, you know, or we can do another 400, right? But like, I think like a nice thing for the committee to think about is that, like, I'm sure that it will, I mean, you know, as we know, for Boston, so much of the 250th stuff starts next year in 2025, right? For the specific revolutionary history, because, you know, both Bunker Hill and Lexington and Concord happen in 75. So I feel like in some ways it's going to feel upon us immediately, but I think it's nice to remember that. And you read that big plan and you're like, gee, we don't have a 300-page plan, right? But I think like the idea that we can operate on a, you know, what do we really want to hit for the 250th? And then also like, what can we extend as part of an arc from 26 to 30?
Carolyn?
Yeah. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I really like this conversation. I'm glad you said what you just did, Kenzie Bach, because I was, as the conversation was unfolding, I was wondering, should this plaque and should our branding encompass 250 and 400? And I wonder, I hadn't gotten to that point yet in this process, but it just sort of occurs to me that because our commission is embracing both, maybe we want to think about a way to message about that. And my only sort of my major backup is that I've been on the archives timeline committee, and we've spent a lot of time, as I believe the other subcommittees have been doing, just talking about how inclusive we want to be, all the neighborhoods, all the cultural groups, all the dates. And then we all see this as very broad and inclusive, and we're sort of excited about being able to connect from 250 to 400. And so I think it's more of a question than a comment, is that at some point, do we want to think about really kind of officially framing ourselves as doing both in an interconnected way? Kind of rather than do the 250 and then kind of move over to 400. I mean, since we know we're doing both, I guess is what I'm.
Yeah. I think it makes sense I think that makes sense. I think that's something that the subcommittees have been discussing. I think especially events, exhibits, and trails has been discussing the distinction between 250 and 400, and how they can work together, but how we can use them as potentially separate. Dory?
Thank you. Another question, I guess, for Hennessy and for the group at large is, you know, what is our process for continuing to gather, you know, input from our many neighborhoods about what else? I mean, 250 is a large number. So is, you know, are we starting to think about, you know, having feedback sessions at BPL branches? Are we thinking about continuing to send out surveys? And then has there been discussion in one of the task forces or subcommittees rather, about the process for actually researching, drafting language and fabricating plaques? Or is this, are these all the subsequent next steps?
Hennessy, you're on mute.
Sorry, we've talked about these things in passing, but no plans have been made as of yet. Yeah.
I think I'll just say, this is my 2 cents, having formerly been on the council, I think like in terms of things like fabricating plaques and et cetera, like a thing that this committee should definitely try to do over like the balance of the calendar year is to get to a place where by January of next year, there's a kind of like proposal for here's some stuff that we really think should be funded in the city budget, so that there's like money for it. So things like plaque fabrication or whatever, like I think we're gonna wanna like kind of scope out and have a proposal that says this is what we really want to see. And then just the one other thing I'd say is, like, to Dory's point, and a little bit related to what I said before about having like some kind of structure that also enables decentralization. Like, I think it would be cool, I'll just put this out here, to like say, you know, like basically like, create like a neighborhood based process for folks to brainstorm like in their neighborhoods, like 5 to 10 plaque sites, right? And do something, and whether that's that we're asking every branch library to organize that, or we're asking, we're having ONS, like we're saying, hey, who's on your email list of all the orgs in each neighborhood, and talking, it would probably make sense to talk to them about how they define the neighborhoods, right? And like, but I think doing some kind of crowdsourcing thing that's like a little less random than just having it out on the internet for a survey, but kind of like uses some of the architecture of the city, right? Like the city's having these coffee hours right now. This is obviously too immediate because they're happening right now, but in the next round of that type of thing, we could easily be like, oh, and by the way, we want people to weigh in on historical significant places in the neighborhood for consideration or something. Could be an idea.
Okay, how do I have Suzanne, Bob, Dr. Trent, and Dory?
So I agree, Kenzie. I was actually going to say this screams ONS to get the word out to the community. And also I think these are all great ideas. Of course, we're supposed to be creating a plan for the city to do all this. So it's not up to us, but we can put the plan together, say, this is our recommendation, to say, we think there should be 250 to 400 plaques and the community should be involved, and this is a way you can do it. And then my other, this is not a comment about what we're talking about, but just a inquiry. Would it be helpful for the entire commemorations committee to have someone come on that we could ask questions to, that was part of the 200th committee and has a really big institutional knowledge about what happened at that time and what they did in the neighborhoods? Because I can make that arrangement if it's warranted and wanted.
That'd be great. So really quick, Murray, let me know that because we don't have a quorum, we can't discuss business as usual. And it's unfortunate. So Joe Bagley let me know he'd be here a little late. So, and a couple other people said RSVP'd but haven't come. So I think we give it 10 more minutes and then see where we go from here. If nobody else has shown up, we'd have to postpone the meeting, which is unfortunate.
Can't we discuss without making decisions?
I don't think, I'm not sure.
Can we give committee updates?
I think it should be fine as long as we don't take decisions.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one more thing. We were talking about ONS, neighborhood libraries. One thing that came out of the bicentennial were neighborhood historical societies. Every neighborhood has one. I'm involved in both the East Boston one, the South Boston one. These are people that really care about their neighborhood's history, and they really should be the people we should connect with to find out what's of interest historically to the neighborhoods, as well as bringing in others. But this really is our network. We don't need to reinvent this particular wheel. We just need to tap into this existing network and hopefully revive it, so they'll be going strong for the next 50 years.
And I just want to build off of what Bob was saying, was that number one, we've got people in the neighborhoods who are already doing stuff. They are not waiting for the city to get their act together, right? Like, they're planning, they're having conversations, they're coming up with digital ideas. So part of it is just making sure whatever the information is, it's getting to those people. Because I've spoken to people on city council, we're having conversations, like everybody's doing stuff. And so we're kind of coming in late. So that's the first thing, is to make sure that we honor the fact that there are other conversations happening. The other thing I would encourage us to think about, especially as a brand identity, is that 400 is significant to Boston. It's not significant nationally and internationally, right? And so will there be brand confusion? For us, it's convenient to say, let's put the 250 and 400 together. But in 2026, is that going to cause a level of confusion for our visitors, right? Considering that we're getting unprecedented numbers of people, ideally millions more than typically. Tall Ships is coming, World Cup is coming. Is the brand going to make sense? Is whatever we do, however we position this, is this going to make sense to someone who may not be as enthusiastic as we are about this? They may care a lot about 250. They may not care anything about 400. So just before we get too far ahead on that, just to remember that not everybody cares about this city's origin point as much as the people on this commission.
Anna, can I just make a quick note?
Mhm.
So I agree with using the neighborhood historical society networks, but as we talked about in our subcommittee, this is an important caution that we do want to reach out to other members of the neighborhood. Sometimes those neighborhood those neighborhood historical societies act as gatekeepers and are not entirely welcoming of new folks who have moved in. So we really want to think about how inclusive this is, and be careful of not putting all our eggs in one basket with one group in one neighborhood.
Bob, is your hand up again, or is it? I think he's talking. I'm not seeing him mute.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Kit, and I know in some neighborhoods there are multiple historical societies that don't get along with each other, but you do have this network. And also, just as an aside, last night I was in a meeting with groups from East Boston, Chelsea, Revere. Next year is the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Chelsea Creek, and they're planning to do things to commemorate that big revolutionary event. Which we should include with Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill. That is, they're very excited about doing something in their neighborhood. So Noelle's right. People are already doing this and acting on this and taking ownership of it, which is a great thing. Now I'll try to figure out how to put my hand down.
Wow, Kenzie, I just saw the comment. That's amazing.
Yeah, Sean's amazing. So Sean just like 10 years ago decided to buy these URLs for the city. And we have now achieved, they have actually been like now put in the control of the city. So, and I think the thing I'd say to the 250 and 400th point, like, I totally agree, Noel. I think like 250 is what puts Boston on the world stage, like in this moment. And I think that for the trick for us, but also the opportunity is like, we want stuff that attracts the attention of those folks who are going to be looking at us for that reason. And we have huge interest in like getting the economic benefit. Like Boston let too much of the tourist traffic go to Philly in, in 76. And like, we'd really like to get more of that for ourselves. And we have the opportunity of going first. So there's a world where you can make a real impact over 25 in a way that kind of like cements Boston's status. But then I think that we have an interest in the city in like having our own folks experience that celebration as very inclusive, as being about the whole 250 years since, and also as leading into the 400th. So I think we have to think about audience segments, and there may be a world in which we're using, to just use Sean's URLs as an example, in which we're using boston250.org heavily and redirecting, things there. And then once 26 is over, we're suddenly using 400.com and .org a lot more, so I think we have to do both things, right? Because we're both talking about our local audience and then this really big international opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good segue, I think, into just discussing Boston 400, I mean, the master plan a little bit further. I annotated it and favorited some things that I found interesting. So let's find it. I think they talked a lot about specific trails being developed. So we know obviously the Freedom Trail, the Black Heritage Trail, but they also had like 18th century Boston, American Revolutionary period. They wanted a technology trail, a science trail. I think they had like a music trail, and that one, and then some of these things are cut up with like music events. I know they've talked about highlighting the National Center of Afro-American Artists. And they had a very interesting, very cool program where they partnered with Lagos and sent some artists there, and Lagos sent some artists here. And so they had really interesting ideas, and I'm interested to know what happened to these trails, if they ever came to fruition. I know some of them definitely have, but I think that if there's a grassroots push for new trails, I wonder how we as a group can legitimize it. This is another conversation we've been having, but not just legitimize it. They've been saying a lot of what Boston 200 was discussing was longevity, and creating material change in the city. And I think they were able to implement some of the things. And I think it would be great to talk, Suzanne, to your point, to talk to someone who was working on Boston 200 just to figure out how these events happened, which events were able to happen, which ones weren't, and why.
As far as the trails are concerned, many of us know we have an innovation trail now that's been widely popular. There's the Women's Heritage Trail. I think that what I'd like to see is someone that works for the Freedom Trail Foundation and what I think we're charged with is creating more neighborhood trails and the history in the neighborhoods, which I think would be a positive outcome of the work that we do. Because there is so much history in all of our neighborhoods, as Bob clearly knows.
Great point.
I have this dream where people walk into their branch libraries and like everyone knows that you can go to the local branch library and pick up a map of the like neighborhood trail for that neighborhood. And that, to Allison's point, it has like a QR code and like things can be updated, right? So it's not just like this total snapshot in time, but like the idea that you could have something like that people would be like, oh, have you checked out the neighborhood trail for there? And then I feel like some people would start to collect them and be like, I want to do them all, and then somebody could be like, I can't believe this thing isn't on the trail. And then you have like a local history conversation that, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that they
Then you
talk
could have like a passport, and that each time you go to the different neighborhoods, you stamp on it and said, I did that trail, each of the neighborhoods.
I'm telling
Awesome.
you, I was in County Louth in Ireland, and they had a seafood trail, which was just a total gimmick to make you like go to all these various places. But they had a great passport book, and like we all did it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's something that they talked about in the Boston 200 plan. They were like, every single neighborhood and its committee that we're helping should create this trail for their neighborhood, and it'll be a thing. And I mean, and they also talk, right, the passport is 200, and they're like, it'll have coupons for hotels and this and the third, and I think that can be expanded, right? If we have, I want to talk about branding, but if we have appropriate branding, then, places that are participating in this can put that branding in, just QR code it. Now you're like virtually checked in, you get something for that, like you get an incentive for it. And have those like the maps existing online, and you have the trails existing also online, so that it's kind of like this virtual ecosystem. But also like a visual ecosystem where you're like, okay, this restaurant is part of this thing. And even if I don't know how to read a map, for example, and I'm just walking around, I know that this is part of it, and it'll be an interesting experience. And maybe the QR codes have like extra information, knowledge, history about this place. that's an idea. Joan?
There we go. Quick question, because this is not my area of expertise. Is there like an official designation for trails, or like could anyone make a trail? Like the Freedom Trail is its own thing, has its own nonprofit associated with it and its own Freedom Trail Industrial Complex or whatever. For these other trail ideas, especially if you want to get out into the neighborhoods and away from downtown Boston, can anyone make a trail or?
Well, I mean, I think in theory, people can make a trail. Whether or not the trail receives appropriate designation and support is a completely different story. So like the Black Heritage Trail, while it was created by private citizen and eventually became the property of the Museum of African American History, as it exists as people know it, and as part of the Boston African American National Historic Site, it was created by an act of Congress, right? So any changes to it require an act of legislation. And so part of that is to think about what city mechanisms, if any, exist. But in theory, anybody can make a trail, right? Like all you have to do is drop a bunch of pins on Google and distribute it to people. So in theory, it's pretty easy. But when you're talking about official sort of things, it really depends on the mechanisms in terms of what sort of support, recognition, and things like that are going to exist. And it just varies here based off of whether it's a private entity, city, or federal entity involved.
Thank you. And I think that's what I was trying to get at is if you create a trail, is there support for that? And so it's a much bigger question than what I thought would be an easy question here. Thank you.
I'm trying to see what we can do, what we should do next. I have here establishing foundations, but I guess we shouldn't do that. Maybe we can do the subcommittee updates, but nothing to a vote, discuss in very broad strokes. So if I have it in order of legislation, preservation tools, timelines, archives, and curricula, and then events, exhibits, and trails. So Allison and Lydia, you guys are here if you want to give, if the co-chairs, I know Amari is not here, so Suzanne, if you want to take the charge, I can supplement. And Bob, I know you said you would take the charge for Joe, but if you guys want to just give a quick update on, that's a good idea. It's a good idea. A quick update on what the subcommittees are working on, just so that everyone who is a part of your subcommittee knows what's going on. So if legislation and preservation tools wants to start.
Yeah, happy to. First of all, I'm finding this conversation to be so interesting because it's a little bit different than what our subcommittee is working on. So I love all the ideas you guys have, and I'll be great to hear what you work on. So yeah, Lydia Lowe and I are co-chairs of this subcommittee, and we talked a little bit about what our overall goals are, what we want to accomplish with this subcommittee, which is we want to make formal recommendations to the city and the BPDA for some policy and procedure changes that prioritize historic preservation, and really give more tools in our toolbox for how we can preserve historic sites and tell stories. So we've had some guest speakers come. Murray Miller and some staff at the Office of Historic Preservation came. We narrowed it down to a focus, at least at the beginning, of talking about survey work, which, you know, we're lacking a citywide survey of historic resources in Boston, and Article 85. So at our last meeting, we spent quite a bit of time down in the weeds of Article 85, which I think we'll pick up over the next few meetings, and try and formalize a recommendation of how to make some meaningful changes to that process, because I think we all acknowledge it's not really working for anybody. And we feel like that this is a really transitional moment for Boston with so much going on with the city and the BPDA, that it's really an opportunity for us to plug in some ideas for change and how we can update our processes. So we're hoping to have more guest speakers and get more involved in things like squares and streets, plan downtown, Article 80, some citywide zoning changes, and make sure that preservation is a priority in all of those conversations. So Lydia, anything else to add, or anybody else in that group? happy to take questions or suggestions from anybody also.
Okay. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, you can put them in the chat. I think a recurring theme that I've obviously that we're working on and have noticed and reading the meeting minutes is of course how we're going to be interacting with Article 80 and the BPDA, and how we can ensure that we make sure that the Article 85 is as equitable as possible. While, you know, some neighborhoods don't have historic districts that are designed, right, to be that kind of that barrier, I should say, how we can best utilize Article 85 to be that stopgap between demolition and saving a cultural or historic building. And I think another thing that we haven't been talking about as much, but is always in the back of our minds, is the historic and cultural resource survey. It's difficult to do much without knowing where that's going, obviously, but without funding, right? But it is in the back of our minds, as it would really help the way that we move through these processes, and the way that like the BLC staff, right, who review Article 85, how much time they spend looking and researching something. With a survey, they wouldn't have to do as much. Okay.
I think it's also, I think it will be interesting for us to maybe have some kind of summary of some interesting practices from other cities. You know, especially, I feel like a lot of there are cities elsewhere that are doing new things with the idea of historic and cultural districts, or historic cultural districts, which I think, you know, here in Boston, it's sort of like they're kind of, those two things are kind of separated. Yeah, so.
I think that's a good idea, Lydia. Maybe that's something we can charge ourselves with. I know that there's, and I can't claim that I know exactly how everything is working, but I know that within Squares and Streets, they're doing some contextual studies, trying to understand what places are significant to people. I know that within Plan Downtown, there's a historic character study that's going to be underway soon to help inform or supplement design guidelines. So I think that kind of piecemeal, we're trying to make sure that we're looking at this in a meaningful way as we come up with new planning and zoning for the city. We did talk about how do we get, which we've been talking about now for a really long time, a comprehensive citywide survey of historic resources that's all in one place and updated regularly, which it has always just seemed like a really big hurdle. So we talked about different ways to get at that. Could we maybe partner with some other advocacy groups that would also like survey work for tree canopy or arts, you know, public art, something like that, and maybe do one really big survey that we could get funded because it checks off multiple buckets. So we have looked at some of that, and I think we'll continue to work within, like I said, these existing processes, and figure out how we can make sure that we're understanding what we have and prioritizing that as well.
Thank you. Thank you both. Bob?
So Joe Bagley and I met and talked about, you know, we've been talking about timelines and events that happened, and it occurred to us that Jim Vrabel did this work. He did it about 20 years ago. He published a book, When in Boston. It's a chronology of everything that happened in Boston up to 2004. And he had it broken down according to social events, political events, business, sports, etc. And he's been continuing this work. And actually now he has this database, and he's made it searchable by neighborhood, by ethnic group, by all of the categories we've been thinking about. How do we want to understand this? And it occurred to us that he has this database. It's been his hobby to collect it. He loves Boston and loves just finding out when what happened when. And when I'm doing a lecture on something, I want to know what was happening in Boston in the 1840s. I just skim through the pages of his book that has this. I know other things that happened in the 1840s, but it's a good way of getting the material there. It occurred to us that one outcome we could have is to find a home for this, because right now, essentially, it lives on his laptop. And if anything happens to his laptop, this is gone. You know, he's tried to present it to the BPL, to other historical groups saying, hey, would you want to host this? And there's a reluctance to doing this. I think if the city were behind this, it would make a huge difference, because, you know, you think about it, for the 1880s, Boston created the Memorial History of Boston. At different points in the city's history, we've created these big books of history. And this is a digital form of history that, you know, maybe books do last longer than this. But the work's been done. I mean, a number of the different subcommittees have been trying to figure out what are the big events. And we already know what the big events are because Jim Vrabel has cataloged them. So that was what Joe Bagley and I were discussing. Is there a way to make this into a project for the Commemorations Commission?
Yeah, and John, go ahead.
Cool, thank you. I just wanted to comment before we go too far down the line about Jim's database work, which I think is a really amazing and huge project. But it is not inclusive of a lot of diversity within Boston, just based on the published book sources that he used to create it. So we'd have to be aware of that and ready to update and add to it.
Of course, one of the things about it is it's possible to add to it. It's kind of like, think about it like a wiki. So I'm not saying that we're going to carve this in stone and put it on the internet.
Cool. I just wanted to say it out loud so that it was like, I know we're not like on the record, but just that, like, yeah. I also wonder, for something like that, and I hate to be the person that brings it back to funding and money over and over again, but like, to support Jim's project or to support any of the projects we're talking about, I think we're going to have to figure out who's paying for it sooner rather than later. And so I put in the comments actually that, like, you know, if places are already doing work towards this, is there a way to funnel funding their way as we continue doing whatever it is we ultimately decide to do?
Yeah, I will add that a concern that was raised almost immediately in when he was giving the presentation was, how much does it cost to even host, you know, something of that size? How much does it cost to maintain it? What manpower is needed to maintain it? I think Carolyn talked about having it become part of curriculums, which is a great idea, right? To have students work with that kind of database and add something that's missing, do more community-based histories and add to it. And that might be one way around it, but ultimately it is something that requires significant upkeep, and that requires funding and staffing.
So I guess the question is, and I think this came up in our exhibition, events and trails subcommittee, is what this commission is responsible for. Like, if we're just saying, here are the suggestions, city figure it out, then I think that's one thing. It is a multi-million-dollar endeavor, but there's a difference between, does it live under BPL? Does it live under the city archives? And then who's hosting and what employee long-term costs are, does automatically become part of the city budget. But I do want to make sure that we keep our scope as a commission in mind, that it may be beyond us, but as a recommendation, as this moves on, to say this should be considered for funding, or NEH is an ideal grantor for this. Like, I think we just need to frame that and not get too in the weeds. Like, we're supposed to be a little bit higher level, but so before we rabbit hole down into anything, I just want to put that out there.
That's a good point. And speaking of, I think maybe if we transition to what events, exhibits, and trails has been doing, I think we've been pretty big picture in some sense. So if you guys want, if Suzanne, if you want to update up to the commission, the people here.
Sure. I mean, basically, we've been talking about what Noel just mentioned about what our charge is and what we're supposed to be doing as far as getting our recommendations into the city, which is pretty soon, and how we can work with the timelines, archives, and curricula subcommittee on getting what they've said that they think should be the events and commemorations that we should be focusing on. But again, we also have had these ideas that Hennessy, you mentioned, like the 250 plaques or signs, whatever it is, as well as, you know, getting the neighborhoods to be able to commemorate the 250th and the 400th. You know, the 400th is going to be a community celebration. We know that many people in Boston are going to be celebrating the fact that it's a huge birthday party for Boston and for residents of the city. So that's what we've been focusing on. And then also the funding part and talking about poor Hennessy doing everything with little support and where we're going to move from here. And if I've forgotten anything, Hennessy, please jump in, or you, Noel, please.
No, I think you've got it. I would say we were also talking about, I mentioned it earlier, we were talking about branding and a logo, and I created some mock-ups, but we decided to pause on that because we didn't have a collective, an appropriate I don't want to say motto, but you know, an appropriate like I guess vision, something that united us. I think I will say what Boston 200's master plan did well is that it had something that it was defining, right? Like the city as a landscape, or the city game is what it called it. And so it would say like the city as this, the city as, you know, the city as an art place, the city as a now I'm blanking, but I think it had a more defined, more concrete, an appropriate convening argument. And I don't think that we have that just yet. And I think that that's also something that the subcommittee was discussing.
Right, and also just as an aside, there, as many people on this call know, there was a lot of money back in '76 from the federal government and a lot of, you know, sponsors and that kind of thing. So it was a lot, and we're at zero basically. With NEC doing everything.
I will say, Mayor White created a fund for Boston 400 a long time ago. He thought that it would compound interest and be worth 30,000. It's not worth what he thought it would be worth. It's like 7,000, maybe. So maybe that's something for the 400th, something we can do with that. Yeah, but for 250, you know, that's something much more imminent and urgent that we don't necessarily have disposable income for.
Can you clarify that, please? What you just said, Hennessy?
Yes.
Mayor White and the fund and.
So actually Francis Bremer, one of the people who left a review, not a review, but a comment, a constituent comment. He sent me an article about the 1930 commemoration, and it's his article, but it was discussing like John Winthrop and commemoration, whatever. But I will pull up the article actually. In the article, it discussed the Curly Parker Fund, which is not Mayor White, Curly Parker Fund, Mayor Curly. Mayor Curly started a Boston 400 fund so that in 2030 there would be what he thought would amount to $25,000 to $30,000. He put $100.
He started this in 1930?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He put in $100, I think, and was hoping that it would be appropriately compounding interest over the last 100 years. And I actually reached out to the Treasury Department and they let me know that the Curly Parker Fund only had $7,043 in it, if I have my numbers correct. So
maybe the budget for a really big birthday cake.
I was gonna say, not that well invested, apparently.
No. No, but you know, it's something.
Is there anybody on the call who's familiar with like, we did at one point sort of hope that eventually, despite all the swirl around America 250, that it would result in some money. Does anybody on the call know the latest on that on the federal side? Because I don't.
I was in Virginia for a Common Cause meeting, which is the second meeting of all the commissions. There isn't a whole lot of clarity of funding per se. I think Massachusetts Office of Tourism may have a little bit more leads on that. I know that Boston is in the legislation for the 250th, but my impression has been, based off of the conversations I've been in, that everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and it's not really clear when the federal money will come into play. So most states have moved on, even the cities that were named have moved on to securing funds in another manner, with the federal funds possibly being supplemental. But Mott would probably have a better answer, as well as MPS may have a better answer regarding that, because they're both a little bit more intimately involved with that federal side of the legislation in those conversations.
Yeah, unfortunately, nobody. NPS isn't here. I think they were supposed to make it, but I think something came up. So it's okay. I think since we don't have too much, I don't want to keep you guys on. I do want to say, to fill out the Google form that I sent for scheduling, it asks what times you cannot do so that I can try to maximize the most appropriate meeting time. For these next 2 meetings, I do ask when you can do, just so that I can schedule as soon as possible. And if I don't get enough participation, I will just give you guys 3 random dates to choose from. And you guys let me know what works best from there. But if you guys have some time, we have some time now. If you take 15 minutes to fill out that form, it'll help me figure out what days I absolutely should not be scheduling any meetings. And I can try to get the May and June meetings out as soon as possible.
Nancy, can you post that link again?
I can. Give me 1 second and I'll send it here.
Is this new? Like, if we already filled out the old one, we need to do this one too?
Yeah, this one is new because the old one was only for these 3 months. This one asks, and this one is new because it asks what days you cannot do in perpetuity. Like if you can't do, I know, for example, I don't want to put her on the spot, but Celia can't do the second Tuesday of every month because she has a town meeting. And I know that a lot of people have told me they have similar things, and I just want to compile that information so that moving forward, I don't schedule something and nobody can make it. And then I'll go from there. Then I won't need to send out a scheduler every 3 months. And I'll just be like,
Hennessy,
okay.
when did you send that?
I sent it when I sent the reminder for this meeting, and I asked people to fill out the doodle and the Google form. But just give me 1 second. I will send it here so that you guys can access it. Okay, it's right here. I'm going to copy the link. Okay, there we go. There it is. Let me know if you can access it. And it is editable. So if you save it, you can change it as things change. Yes, Caroline.
I'm going to ask an embarrassing question. I feel like I should know the answer to this, but with the sharing of the plan that you did, and the question about what actually happened, was there a final report written? Is there an easy document to go to so that, because I'm very familiar with the neighborhood histories, I'm familiar with some of the research that was done, but I feel like my understanding of what happened in 76 is just fragmented, and I was just wondering if you've come across, or anyone has it, is there an easy source for that other than Jim Vrabel's chronology?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question because I mean, if it's out there, it's not easily findable. I mean, I've found what Archives has online, so that all the 200 plans and the neighborhood series are on archive.org. I know that, Kirsten, yes. Thank you. The Flickr, there's like Boston 200 photos on Flickr, so that's been helpful for framing some things, but I'll let Kristen take it away.
Yeah, so in the city archives, we do have all the records from Boston 200. And the collection is actually not completely processed. So what's listed online is not everything that we have. So we've been working on trying to get the collections processed so that it will be a good resource for the planning for the next commemorations. But they kept very good records. They had all these different programs. It's all very well organized. We're just working on getting it all cataloged and up on our website. So
But no easy final report for us to skim.
I'll do some checking and see see if they did come up with a final report. Yeah, there's just a lot in that collection. So, you know, a lot of good research that they did and everything. So I'll definitely check.
Kristen, it might also be worth checking you know how like the council or the city used to have those like report books for each year, you
The
know, with
city
like all the
documents,
departments, with all the departments doing reports.
the city documents.
Yeah, and I wonder if the one for 76 might have it.
Yeah, I can check. I know they stopped like printing them, like officially, like binding them and printing them around in the 70s because of funding. But we do have some that go into like the 80s and 90s of those. So I can definitely check and see if Boston 200 submitted an annual report or any final report.
Right. So because we can't vote on anything, I just want to, we'll end it here. I will. If you guys take some time to fill out the form, that would be great. And then I will start scheduling the next batch of meetings right after this. Okay. And I can resend it by email if that's helpful. Just in case you guys don't take it from the chat. Okay, so I don't know that we have to adjourn because I have a quorum. So I'll say, you know, I motion to adjourn. But if we wanna make an official motion, that we can. But if not, thank you guys for coming. It's really frustrating that we literally just missed it by one person, but you know, things happen. We at least have something to go off of, which is great. So thanks everyone.
We tried, Hennessy.
We really did. We really did, Suzanne.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.